The Mediterranean lies calm under a cobalt sky, its waters glinting with the harsh brilliance of late summer. On the horizon, steel giants stir. In our timeline, the battleship had already faded into memory by the 1950s, replaced by carriers and missiles. But here, in this imagined history, the behemoths of another age are not yet obsolete. The United States Navy has brought forth Montana, the battleship that was never built, a ship designed in secret to crush even the Yamato. Across the sea, the Soviet Union answers with its own monster, Project 24, a design meant to outgun Montana, a battleship bristling with power that never saw the light of day. And on this day, in the tense waters of the Cold War Mediterranean, their paths cross. The question is not just who would win in steel and fire. The question is what happens when history refuses to end, when the great guns of another era roar into the missile age, and when two superpowers are forced to gamble not just ships, but the fate of the world. Imagine the trigger. It is 1957, and the Mediterranean is a boiling cauldron of tension. The Suez Crisis has shaken Europe, the Soviets have thrown their weight behind Egypt, and the Americans are determined to keep their influence strong in Greece, Turkey, and Italy. Both sides deploy fleets to the sea. Aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers. But here, in this alternate reality, the admirals have decided to test the giants that were never meant to fight. The Montana, with 12 16-inch guns, heavier armor than any ship afloat, and radar systems that peer through storm and night. And the Project 24, the Soviet dream battleship, imagined with 9 18-inch guns, reinforced armor belts, and speed enough to challenge anything the West can deploy. They were never real, yet in this world they exist, icons of steel, symbols of pride, and proof that the battleship era is not dead. And as their wakes draw closer across the deep blue water, the question looms. What happens when two titans born of fear and ambition finally meet? The scene shifts to the American flagship. Inside Montana's bridge, Admiral William Radford leans over the chart table. He knows this ship should not exist. But Congress, spurred by whispers of Soviet super battleships, had approved her construction in 1944. Too late for the Second World War, but too early to discard her in the missile age, Montana was finished as a Cold War deterrent. She is massive, nearly 70,000 tons when fully loaded, with radar-guided fire control, layered anti-air defenses, and the kind of armor plate that makes even torpedoes struggle. To her crew, she is the last word in American naval power, the final safeguard against the unknown. Now Radford faces a dilemma. Intelligence reports that the Soviets have slipped their own super battleship into the Mediterranean, escorted by cruisers and destroyers. It is a move designed not for combat, but for intimidation. Yet he knows intimidation can spiral into war. He orders Montana south, her engines pushing her vast bulk through the waves toward the invisible line where NATO and Soviet power clash. On the other side of the sea, Project 24 cuts forward with grim determination. She is larger than Montana, her design a brutal expression of Soviet doctrine. Thicker armor, larger guns, a ship meant to absorb punishment and return it in overwhelming force. In our reality, she remained paper sketches, her blueprints buried as the age of the missile dawned. But here, Stalin's successors saw value in the battleship's image. Project 24 sails as both a weapon and a statement. The Soviet Union is not only a land empire but a naval power capable of standing toe-to-toe with the United States. Her captain, Admiral Sergei Gorshkov, is no stranger to brinkmanship. He believes naval presence is theater and nothing commands respect like a battleship silhouetted against the horizon. But he also knows the risks. A clash with Montana could ignite a wider war, one that missiles and bombers would finish before either battleship could reload its guns. Yet he cannot back down. To retreat is weakness. To advance is danger. And so Project 24 presses on. The Mediterranean becomes the stage. Greek fishermen see the wakes of distant ships. Italian coast watchers note unusual radar echoes, and in Washington and Moscow, tense voices debate whether to pull back or let the giants circle. The world may not know it, but history itself has bent. The age of the battleship, supposedly ended, refuses to die. The first sighting happens at dawn. Montana's radar operators pick up a contact moving east of Crete. A large contact, too large for a cruiser, too fast for a carrier group. The reports flow to Radford, who grips the edge of the plotting table. There is no doubt. This is the Soviet monster. The crew of Montana prepare. Magazines unlock, turrets grind. The giant ship awakens. Men stand ready at guns that were designed for a war long past but now find themselves called to battle again. And in that moment, the world holds its breath. Because here lies the paradox. The Cold War was built on the threat of missiles and bombers, of sudden death from the sky. But if these two battleships fight, the war will return to an older rhythm. The thunder of guns, the clash of armor, the duel of steel leviathans on open water. It will be a test not only of technology, but of willpower. Who dares fire first? Who risks breaking the fragile peace for the pride of nations? The horizon narrows, the sea shimmers in the rising sun, and two shadows converge. Montana and Project 24, ships that never should have been, are about to define an age that was supposed to belong to rockets. And as the distance closes, we are left with one haunting thought. When giants that never lived take the stage, history itself trembles. The sea before Crete grows restless, though no wind stirs. It is the anticipation, the pressure of two titans moving toward one another. Sailors aboard Montana feel it first, a shiver in the steel beneath their boots, as if the ship herself senses the approach of her rival. Below decks, men stand by at the shell hoists, lifting projectiles as tall as a man, each weighing more than a small car. Powder bags are stacked like corded firewood, ready to feed the 12 16-inch guns. The ship hums with tension, a city of iron preparing for war. On Project 24, the mood is heavier still. Her guns are larger, her armor thicker, but she sails into hostile waters with fewer friends. Gorshkov walks the length of his bridge with slow, measured steps, his face impassive. He knows the Mediterranean is crowded with American eyes, submarines lurking, aircraft circling, destroyers probing. Yet he does not falter. The Soviet Union has chosen this theater, this moment, to prove its steel. Every man aboard Project 24 understands it. They are not merely sailors. They are actors in a play meant for the world. And yet, when two superpowers send monsters to sea, the play can so easily turn into tragedy. At first, the confrontation is silent. The ships sight each other at long range, their silhouettes cutting black against the pale horizon. Binoculars flash, radars sweep. Montana slows her engines, holding steady, keeping her broadside hidden. Project 24 angles slightly, testing, probing, daring the Americans to reveal their hand. Minutes pass like hours. In Washington, the White House Situation Room fills with voices, debating whether to order Radford to hold or strike. In Moscow, Politburo members cluster around maps, wondering if Gorshkov will act on his own. The world teeters on a knife's edge. Then the unexpected happens. A Soviet destroyer, perhaps overeager, cuts too close to Montana's screen. Its radar locks, its guns elevate. Whether by mistake or design, the gesture is taken as a threat. An American escort cruiser fires a warning shot, a single round from its 8-inch battery, plunging into the sea off the destroyer's bow. The Mediterranean erupts in noise and panic. The destroyer veers away, but the signal has been sent. The duel cannot be delayed much longer. On Montana's deck, claxons wail. Turrets rotate, their barrels rising like cathedral towers. Fire control officers call ranges, their voices flat but urgent. Radford knows the stakes. He does not want to start a war. Yet he cannot allow the Soviets to believe Montana will shy from combat. He orders a course to starboard, presenting the full broadside. In that single maneuver, the old language of battleship war returns. Montana dares her enemy to do the same. Gorshkov responds in kind. Project 24 swings broadside, her immense hull cutting a black line across the waves. 9 18-inch rifles elevate, their muzzles yawning toward the sky. For a moment, time seems frozen. Two ships, more powerful than anything seen before or since, stare across a shrinking gulf of sea. The first shot comes from Montana. At 32,000 yards, well beyond the horizon for the human eye, radar guides the fire. 12 guns thunder as one. The blast shakes the ship, flinging spray into the air, shattering windows on the bridge. The shells rise in slow, terrible arcs, invisible but for faint trails, each carrying the weight of destiny. They fall minutes later, straddling Project 24 with towering plumes. No hit, yet. But the duel has begun. Project 24 answers. 9 18-inch guns roar, their shockwaves rolling across the Mediterranean like thunderclaps. The shells scream overhead, slamming into the sea near Montana with geysers tall as houses. Steel groans as fragments rattle across her deck, but she remains unscathed. The ocean itself seems to convulse under the weight of the bombardment. What follows is not merely combat. It is a storm of iron. Both ships trade salvos at ranges unthinkable in earlier wars. Each volley takes nearly 2 minutes from fire to fall, a long eternity in which crews wait, pray, and brace for impact. Every hit could end lives by the dozens. Every miss is a reprieve bought by chance. Montana's radar proves its worth. Her second salvo walks closer, her third closer still. On the fourth, a shell crashes through the sea just off Project 24's bow, showering her forward deck in steel shards. Men fall screaming, alarms wail, yet the Soviet behemoth keeps firing. Her armor, thicker than any in history, holds against near misses. Her captain knows only a direct strike will matter. And then it happens. A Soviet shell, by chance or brilliance, plunges into Montana's aft deck, punching through armor and exploding near a secondary battery. Flames rise. Sailors scramble with hoses. Compartments flood with smoke. The Americans are shaken, but not crippled. Montana's guns roar again in reply, her turrets cycling with cold precision. Back and forth the duel rages, each ship straddling the other, each seeking that one decisive hit. The Mediterranean becomes an echo chamber of thunder, the sky smeared with powder haze. Aircraft circle at a distance, ordered not to intervene. Submarines lurk, waiting for the word to strike. Yet all eyes remain on the giants, as if the fate of the Cold War itself will be decided not by missiles, but by steel forged for another war. On Montana's bridge, Radford's hands are steady, but his mind churns. He knows this cannot last. One lucky salvo could doom his ship, and with it America's prestige in the Mediterranean. He must find a way to end this without sparking the global fire. On Project 24, Gorshkov thinks the same. Victory is meaningless if it leads to nuclear exchange. Yet pride, politics, and history demand they fight on. Both men understand the paradox. The duel is not about sinking the enemy, it is about proving who blinks first. The range closes to 25,000 yards. The guns fire faster now, the salvos landing with greater fury. Montana scores a glancing hit on Project 24's upper works, wrecking a radar array, scattering fragments across her bridge. Soviet gunners cheer, then fall silent as they realize their targeting has grown less precise. But Project 24 answers with brutal force, her next salvo hammering Montana's armored belt. The shells shatter against the armor, but the shock rattles every bone aboard. The stalemate deepens. Both ships bleed, but neither bows. The Mediterranean watches in awe. The world holds its breath. Because here lies the truth. In this alternate history, the Cold War has found a new language. Not the hiss of missiles, not the silent flash of warheads, but the ancient thunder of battleship guns echoing across the sea. And somewhere deep inside, both admirals know they are dancing on the edge of apocalypse. The smoke thickens over the Mediterranean. Hours have not passed, only minutes, but the duel already feels eternal. Montana and Project 24 circle each other like wolves too large for the sea that holds them, their salvos thundering in rhythm, each ship daring the other to falter. The air smells of cordite and burning paint, the sea littered with twisted steel fragments, splintered planks, and lifeboats torn from their racks. For all their power, both ships know this truth. Battleships are not meant to fight alone. And now, the escorts begin to edge closer. American destroyers form a thin screen around Montana, their crews staring up in awe at the massive turrets firing above them. Soviet cruisers and destroyers cluster around Project 24, ready to hurl torpedoes if the chance arises. One wrong move, one torpedo in the right place, and the giant duel will end, not with thunder, but with a single fatal wound below the waterline. Admiral Radford considers the risk. He knows Montana's armor can shrug off shells, but not a spread of torpedoes. His destroyer captains ask for permission to close the range, to charge and disrupt the Soviet screen. He denies them, for now. He needs the focus to remain between the giants. If smaller ships are unleashed too soon, the Mediterranean could become a graveyard. On Project 24, Gorshkov wrestles with the same dilemma. His doctrine urges aggression. The Soviets have always prized torpedoes, the knife thrust to finish the fight. Yet he knows Montana's escorts are eager, disciplined, and armed with sonar and depth charges. A torpedo rush might not cripple the American battleship, but it could doom his own screen. So he holds them back for now, relying on the thunder of his 18-inch guns to carry the day. The range falls to 22,000 yards. At this distance, accuracy sharpens. Montana scores her first decisive blow. A 16-inch shell punches through Project 24's superstructure, detonating near a secondary gun mount. The explosion tears men and steel alike, shredding the mount into molten wreckage. Flames lick upward, smoke pours across the deck. For the first time, the Soviet crew feels the shock of real damage. But the giant does not stop. Project 24's turrets swing, and 9 guns answer in a single monstrous broadside. The shells scream down in unison, and fate takes its turn. One plunges through Montana's forward deck, detonating deep inside a crew compartment. The blast rips upward, sending a column of flame into the dawn sky. Men die instantly. Compartments flood with smoke, but the armored citadel holds. Montana survives. She staggers, but she roars back with fury. This is no longer just a duel. It is a trial of will. The world beyond the sea now takes notice. In Washington, Eisenhower paces, his hands clenched behind his back. He demands options. Airstrikes, submarine attacks, negotiations. His advisors warn him any escalation could ignite the Cold War into a nuclear firestorm. In Moscow, Khrushchev listens as aides whisper of victory and humiliation, of how Project 24 must not retreat. The duel has become political theater, watched by allies and enemies alike. Neither leader wants to blink, yet neither dares push too far. And so the giants fight on, locked in a struggle neither can win outright. As the range narrows to 18,000 yards, the sea changes. Wind picks up, waves rise, visibility falters. Rain squalls cut across the horizon, obscuring silhouettes and sudden veils. For Montana, this is an advantage. Her radar can see through storm and smoke. For Project 24, this is danger. Her damaged arrays flicker, her fire control falters. Gorshkov feels the moment slipping. He must act before the storm tilts the balance. He gives the order. His destroyers will attack. Like wolves breaking from the pack, 4 Soviet destroyers surge forward, wakes foaming, torpedo tubes swinging into line. Their intent is unmistakable. They will close, fire, and sacrifice themselves if need be. Radford reacts instantly. American destroyers peel off to intercept, their guns spitting rapid fire across the waves. The Mediterranean becomes chaos. Torpedoes launch, trails of white racing across the gray sea. Depth charges thump into the water as American escorts weave and fire. Explosions rip the surface, fountains of spray tower skyward. 1 Soviet destroyer disintegrates under a direct hit, another limps burning, but 2 make it through, launching their spreads at Montana. The crew braces. The ship lurches as her massive rudder swings, turning her bulk with surprising grace. The torpedoes streak past, missing by hundreds of yards. The sea boils, but Montana endures. Her guns roar in reply, blasting apart the last attacking destroyer with shells meant for battleships, but fired in anger at anything that moves. Yet the attack has done its work. Project 24 has bought herself time. Gorshkov angles in closer, bringing his ship within 15,000 yards. Here, his 18-inch guns can strike with murderous power. Montana's radar guides her fire, but at this range, even her armor may not withstand a direct hit. The duel reaches its climax. Both ships broadside, firing salvo after salvo, their guns belching flame that lights the storm-darkened sky. Shells smash into armor, shattering steel, tearing apart decks. Montana takes another hit, her aft turret jammed, men killed in the blast. Project 24 staggers under a blow to her forward belt, the explosion buckling plating, flooding compartments. Both ships bleed, yet neither surrenders. The escorts circle, but none dare intervene further. They know this is no longer their fight. It is a clash of giants, an echo of another war, fought in defiance of the missile age. And within the storm, the psychological turning point comes. Montana steadies her aim, her remaining turrets firing with unrelenting rhythm. A shell plunges into Project 24's deck just behind her bridge, detonating in a massive fireball. The shockwave shatters glass, crushes bulkheads, and throws men to the floor. Flames engulf the command center. Gorshkov himself is hurled against a steel wall, dazed, bleeding, but alive. His ship lurches, burning, her great guns still firing but with less coordination. Radford sees it. For the first time, Montana has the edge. He knows he can press it, finish the Soviet ship, sink her into the Mediterranean. But he also knows what that would mean: escalation, retaliation, war beyond imagination. He hesitates. His finger hovers over the line between victory and annihilation. And in that pause lies the fate of history. The storm howls across the Mediterranean, rain sweeping in sheets across decks slick with blood and oil. Montana and Project 24 still fire, but their rhythm falters. Each salvo takes longer, each hit cuts deeper. They are no longer pristine titans. They are wounded giants, dragging themselves through the sea, locked in a death struggle neither can afford to finish. On Montana's bridge, Radford watches the Soviet ship burn. Her forward decks are twisted, her bridge a furnace of smoke and shattered steel. Yet her guns continue to roar, stubborn, relentless. He feels admiration for the men aboard her, men who refuse to bow, who stand at their post even as their ship becomes a floating pyre. He knows that same spirit lives among his own crew, men fighting through fire and pain to keep Montana alive, and he feels the weight of every life on both ships, balanced against the fate of the world. Then the radio crackles. Washington speaks. Eisenhower's voice is absent, but his orders are clear. De-escalate. Do not sink the Soviet battleship. Do not drag the Cold War into the abyss. Radford stares at the message, the words like lead. He knows his men expect him to finish what they've started. He knows one more concentrated broadside could send Project 24 to the bottom. But he also knows one more hit could be the spark that ignites Armageddon. On Project 24, Gorshkov faces the same torment. His bridge burns, his radar is blind, his ship lists under flooding. Yet his crew fights with fanatical resolve, shells still leaving the barrels, gunners shouting through choking smoke. He wants to order another charge, to drive closer, to strike Montana in the heart. But his communications buzz with Moscow's command. Hold. Survive. Do not be sunk, but do not provoke nuclear war. Pride and politics twist inside him, tearing at his soul. To retreat is humiliation. To fight on is suicide. The duel drags into silence. Both ships circle warily, guns lowering, smoke cloaking them like ghosts. Escorts hover at the edge, unwilling to break the spell. The rain slackens, the storm eases, and for the first time in hours, the horizon clears. What is revealed is haunting. Montana lists slightly, scars burning across her decks, turrets blackened and bent. Project 24 burns from bow to stern, her flag scorched but still flying. Two giants, undefeated, unbowed, yet ruined by their own defiance. The world reacts with disbelief. News filters out from Crete to London, from Istanbul to Washington, from Alexandria to Moscow. The age of missiles was supposed to make battleships irrelevant, yet here two had met and fought like gods in the storm. Headlines scream of the battle that should never have been. Analysts argue whether it was victory or stalemate. Sailors who survived call it madness. Politicians call it a warning. In Washington, Eisenhower addresses the nation. His words are grave. This battle reminds us that steel and pride must never be allowed to dictate the fate of mankind. He orders Montana back to Norfolk for repairs, her presence too provocative to remain in the Mediterranean. She sails away, wounded but alive, cheered by NATO allies as a symbol of American resolve. Yet the cheer feels hollow. Every sailor aboard knows how close they came to plunging the world into nuclear fire. In Moscow, Khrushchev spins the story differently. Project 24 did not sink, she endured. She faced the mightiest ship America could build and fought her to a standstill. The Soviet Union, he declares, has proven its naval power. But beneath the propaganda lies unease. Gorshkov's ship barely survived, and the Soviet leadership realizes they cannot match the American fleet in endless duels of giants. Project 24 limps into Sevastopol, smoke still rising from her hull, met with both pride and sorrow. She is hailed as a hero, yet whispers in the Kremlin suggest her survival is Pyrrhic. For the sailors, the memories never fade. On Montana, men speak of the thunder of the 18-inch shells, of the nightmarish fireball that tore through their decks, of the sight of a Soviet giant burning but unbroken. They know they were part of something the world will never forget. On Project 24, survivors remember the moment Montana's shells smashed into their bridge, the screaming, the fire, the way their ship shuddered but refused to die. They call it endurance. Others call it madness. Historians later ask the haunting question, what if one more shell had struck true? What if one torpedo had hit Montana amidships? Would Washington have unleashed bombers and missiles? Would Moscow have answered with nuclear fire? Would the world we know today even exist? This is the paradox of the duel. Neither ship truly won, yet both claimed victory. Neither nation advanced, yet both pulled back from the brink. The battle was fought not for territory, not for strategy, but for pride. And pride, once unleashed, nearly ended everything. As Montana sails west and Project 24 east, the Mediterranean falls silent again. The sea swallows the wreckage, the smoke drifts into memory, and the world moves on to missiles, submarines, and carriers. But the ghosts remain. Sailors whisper of that day when giants that should never have lived crossed paths, when the Cold War was decided not in shadows and codes, but in the thunder of great guns. And we are left with a single truth. The battleship era was supposed to be over. Yet, in that storm, for a single terrible moment, it returned, and nearly dragged the world into the abyss. If you found yourself drawn into this journey through the Cold War that never was, consider joining us again. There are more stories waiting, more forgotten designs, more hidden what-ifs, more moments where history might have turned. Because sometimes the battles that never happened tell us the most about the world we live in now.